Imagine you're in a meeting and something just feels off. The project is solid. Your delivery is confident, but the energy in the room dips, just changes, and you feel it. You later realize you were focused on proving your point and not reading the room. You were communicating and not connecting. This is what we call a rethink moment. In the moment when you stop operating on autopilot and start asking, what am I missing here? What else is true? How could I show up differently? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the RETHINK podcast. When you tune in to RETHINK, you found a place where we pause, reflect, and explore new ways of thinking about leadership and connection and growth. I'm Dr. David Zierk, and I'm excited that you're here for this episode. This podcast is about stepping back from the fast pace of modern life and asking our ultimate question, what if there's a better way to connect and be stronger together? Today's episode's a little different. I'm going to go back to the beginning. I want to unpack for you in this podcast the mindset that started everything. When I developed the concept of relationship intelligence and turning conflict into connection years and years ago, to really help people understand that conflict is a friend, because under every conflict is an unmet need. And if you begin to see conflict in that way, that you or the other person or both are in a state of deprivation, you need something, but the other person is not seeing it, not reading your mind, not attending to what it is that you need. You might not even know what it is that you need, but you feel it. That's relationship intelligence, being able to turn conflict into connection. But when I step back from that very large construct, I ask myself, how do I teach it? I mean, we have these moments. Like I tell people, conflict is not the problem. Disconnection is the problem. When we're together and connected, everything goes really well. You feel strong. You give yourself permission to be yourself. Authenticity shows up. And hopefully you reciprocate and you give the other person an opportunity to be themselves. And that's that level of kind of intimate connection that people make. And when we do that naturally, you're demonstrating to yourself and others that you have relationship intelligence. But when things get tough, when things go off the rails, when conflict shows up, oftentimes unexpectedly and unwantedly, you have to ask yourself, what do we do? And this is where I landed on the concept of RETHINK. RETHINK stands for relationship enhanced thinking. It's both a mindset and a practice. It's a way of thinking with connection in mind. So let's go back. Relationship intelligence is turning conflict into connection. That sounds like a supreme aspirational goal in life, turn conflict into connection. And I gave you a little hint about how to do that. Always look underneath the conflict, identify the unmet need, address that unmet need, and oftentimes emotions begin to dissipate. Thinking brain goes a little bit more online, connections get strengthened, and it's like pressing a restart button. But when we do this intentionally through the lens of rethinking, thinking with connection in mind, as a mindset and a practice and a behavioral set, then all of a sudden we can begin to handle the hardest moments that we experience. Now, one of the things that's really great about rethinking is that what it introduces, since life is happening at warp speed, it's really inviting people just to slow down, just enough to consider the relational impact that your words, your decisions, your habits, your behavior is having on the other person. In fact, being aware of how your behavior impacts other people makes my critical list of the top 10 life skills. How does your behavior impact others? Just to have fun with that, I call that LISA, the level of impact sensitivity awareness. And it's really important to tune in to that, because oftentimes we get caught up in our performance, in proving to people what our point is, to impress. And that's not the point. That's communication. And when you communicate without connecting, communication fails. I would argue each and every time. Therefore, flipping that on its head, connection precedes communication. We have to connect before we communicate. I'll take it one step further. I think the power of rethinking is so amazing that once you connect genuinely with authenticity and it's felt and understood and appreciated and valued by the other person, you can almost say anything you want. In that case, almost communication becomes secondary. It's the connection that really facilitates understanding. So here we are. Let's take this podcast and really drill into what rethinking is all about. But why should you care? Because I'm going to argue that the ability to rethink in real time when it's really needed gives you an edge. It lets you adapt faster, resolve conflict, lead better, more effectively, and here's the piece de resistance. It allows you to build trust. And trust is what I call square one. Without trust, there is no capacity for connection. And without connection, communication fails. Without communication, relationships fail. And that domino effect happens. So, trust, square one. And how do we build trust? You rethink the moment. So I said rethink, a critical component of rethinking is slowing down. And let me tell you why timing is so important and being aware of time is so relevant. In behavioral psychology, there's this concept called the stimulus and the response. Something happens and you respond to that. You see a snake, that's the stimulus, and you scream or you run. That's what I would do. My wife would move towards the snake. She has a different response. But what's really interesting, what happens between the stimulus and response? And there's the thinnest opportunity for engagement and engaging differently than you usually do. And what's really interesting, when you begin to really examine that thin space between stimulus and response, you'll realize that it's 1/4 of a second. It's 250 milliseconds. It's a split second. But that split second is just enough to begin to rethink what it is that you're going to do, being aware of how your behavior is going to impact the other person. That's a fancy concept called anticipatory empathy. And it helps you really understand that the most important thing when you rethink is always thinking in terms of mutuality, mutual benefit, mutual growth. But when you keep mutuality in mind, you probably never will go wrong. So let's take the rethink word and ask ourselves, what does it signify? And let's use it as an acronym. Well, so each letter stands for something, right? Welcome to the way my mind works. I love acronyms. So let's start off with the R. It's probably the easiest one to remember and the easiest one to talk about. And the R is relationship. Relationships. This is the connection between people. This is when connection occurs, and that serves as the foundation for trust and growth. Like I said, it doesn't happen the other way around. You need trust in order to grow, but you need to be connected. Relationships are vital, and let me see if I can really embellish that a little bit more. When it comes to identity formation, a great deal of the scholarship out there suggests that identity is formulated based on 3 building blocks. Number 1 is competency. What are you good at? Are you good at kicking a soccer ball? Keep practicing. You might make the Olympics someday. Competency. Are you good at singing? Keep practicing and you might get a contract someday by a major music label. Whatever you're good at naturally, step into it, get better and better. That's competency. The second building block of identity is a fancy word called autonomy. It's basically self-direction. I like to think about it as uniqueness. What makes you unique, and are you aware of your uniquenesses so that you can move yourself in the right direction? So here we have identity being formulated as competency and autonomy, self-direction. I have control over myself. But there's a third foundational building block, and it's called belonging. And you need a relationship to belong. You need a relationship to be in partnership. You need a relationship to feel that deep, trusting, vital connection. When you're in connection with another person and you experience a relationship, they do something amazing. They give you permission to be yourself. Now, isn't that interesting? Your sense of self is greatly shaped by your ability to be in relationship with other people. That's the importance of relationship. It's a big piece of your identity. One of the things I always like to emphasize is that conflict is not the problem, disconnection is. So when we're in disconnection, we're out of relationship. We always want to then repair that disconnection and get back into a state of relationship. And how do we do that? We go to the E. The E stands for enhanced. So far we have relationship enhanced. Enhanced, let's just use the plain language definition of it, and that's the ability to improve something and have something become more valuable. We're going to enhance it. And the way we enhance something from a relational perspective is we stay open. We keep an open mind and we lead with curiosity. So here we are enhancing the relationship, enhancing the connection. Sure, there might be a problem, there might be a challenge, there might be something that's going on between us or among us in a group. But as long as we keep our eye focused on staying connected or repairing the disconnection and going back to a state of connection, that will enhance the relationship. 2 down, 5 to go. So we're at R and E. Now we move into the think piece, T. T is critical. It's trustworthiness. Trustworthiness. I told you square one is trust. You need a square one in order for a relationship to grow, in order for personal growth to be realized. Trustworthiness is what's needed dynamically between people. What's really interesting about trustworthiness is that on the easiest level, it's about consistency. It's about being reliable. It's about being someone that others can count on. Here's the way I like to think of trustworthiness. There's a time lag between those times when you extend trust and you say, I do, and the resulting behavior, the I did. There's a time lag between I'll show up Friday at 6 o'clock, that's a promise. And then the question is do you perform according to that statement? Or are you a little bit late, a lot bit late, or do you forget about it altogether? Your ability to handle that moment, here's what I promised to do, here's what I do, informs the other person's perception of you and establishes for them their felt understanding of your trustworthiness. You understand how trustworthiness occurs as a result of that time lag. In between when you said you do something and you did it, the other person's experience of you will show up. And you can see how trustworthiness is very character revealing. So let's go from trustworthiness, now that we have locked that in, to the H. The H has to do with honesty. Honesty. Well, we're all told from young age to be honest, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But in relationship perspective, I'm going to kind of advance that a little bit, maybe tweak it just a little bit. When I talk about honesty, I'm talking about authenticity, being your honest self in the real moment. And then asking yourself, what does the other person need from me? So if I gave it to them, they'd be in a better place to give me what it is that I need. So I have to reflect honestly about what it is that I need. I have to kind of do some conjecture and ask myself honestly, what does the other person need? So authenticity is much more important than perfection. As soon as you get caught up in perfection, you're caught up on performance. And honesty has very little to do with performing. You know, in Aristotle philosophy, honesty is a virtue. So from an Aristotelian perspective, you can have too little or too much honesty. Let's just break that down for a moment. Too much honesty, that's being blunt, that's being direct, probably being hurtful or insensitive. We have a lot of names for people that are too honest. On the other hand, we can have too little honesty. That's people who omit important pieces of the truth. These are people oftentimes that are driven by avoidance of conflict. not wanting to share their truth, however genuine it is, because they're fearful of how the other person is going to react. They don't want to cause harm to the relationship or cause a disconnection to occur. And because of that fear, they withhold their honesty. That's the reason I like to reframe honesty as authenticity. When you give yourself permission to be yourself, you're going to increase your self-confidence, find the words that need to be conveyed, and doing it in such a way likely that the other person is going to understand you. That's the function of honesty. From honesty, we move to the I, and that's imagination. One of the greatest words, imagination. This is being able to see beyond the obvious. I always like to think of imagination as you're forecasting something, starting with a blank piece of paper, you're forecasting something, and then you put your imagination to it, and your imagination activates that forecasting process. Perhaps you can call that future casting. But it expands the possibility. It steps into the world of what if. Some really popular forms of team building imagination is brainstorming. Hey, let's brainstorm. Or mind mapping. We'll see where our mind is going and all the adjacent thoughts that we might have associated with that. Or just idea swapping. Or perhaps the best one of all is storytelling. When you convey something that's important to you in a story format, it really increases the other person's interest in what's going on. So instead of just delivering facts, you deliver a story. And that makes you more relevant, makes you much more interesting, and also allows you an opportunity to activate some imagination and maybe exaggerate a little bit, take some liberties in terms of the way you tell the story, have it kind of increase the fun factor of the story being told. That's the power of imagination. Anything can be done. Anything's possible. So now let's move to N. When I was thinking about the acronym of RETHINK, relationship enhanced, trustworthiness, honesty, imagination, and then I got to the N, and my mind kind of stalled. And I thought to myself, there's got to be something there that I can't quite think about. So am I just trying to force feed this and come up with an N just for the sake of having a completed acronym? I like to think there's something above and beyond my thought process on that, and then it came to me. N stands for negotiating. And I'm going to have a separate podcast on negotiating because that's how important negotiation is in relationships. Negotiating with mutual benefit, not just for personal gain, but negotiating for mutual benefit. I'm going to argue that negotiating effectively and mutually with relationship intelligence is a way of enhancing and maintaining a relationship. Hey, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? One person says, I don't care. They're not negotiating. And oftentimes that kind of comment, even though it's not meant to be negative or off-putting, is really kind of an example of underperforming in a relationship. You might want to rethink that. Where do you want to go for dinner tonight? And the person goes, I want to go for pizza. And the other person goes, well, we just went out for pizza last night. I know, but it was the best pizza I've ever had in my whole life. Now that I added another phrase about my experience of the pizza, I'm beginning to negotiate with you. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm always going to get my way. Negotiating means moving forward with mutual benefit. But I am sharing with you honestly that there's a piece of me or a part of me that really wants pizza again. That's how good it was. Negotiating is open communication. Keeping mutual benefit in mind, it builds trust. Trust is a word that we go back to time and time and time again in relationship intelligence. You always have to go back to something. You always have to go back to that square one. If something isn't good and a disconnection occurs, you can say to your partner, you can say to your teammate, hey, let's go back to square one. And when you offer that phrase, let's go back to square one, what you're indicating to your partner, your teammate, even your boss or your children is I respect you. I enjoy our connections, but right now, this moment is not enjoyable. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be solely responsible for the repair of this relationship. So I want to go back to square one. So it's not a statement of defeat. It's an empowering statement. Let's go back to square one. Because when you have a square one, that's a great starting point. It's an affirmation and ultimate validation that there's something really strong and you can build from. If a relationship doesn't have a square one, or if trust has been broken or shattered, that relationship goes to ground zero. And that's a completely different conversation. That's a completely different situation. And learning how to rebuild that level of destructured trust is more than just a podcast. So there's the end. There's the negotiating. And again, we're going to do a separate podcast on that. It's going to be a really exciting one because I do believe that as we get better at negotiating, and let me give you an example of negotiating. A great form of negotiation is being able to stand up for yourself without putting other people down. Now, that's my number one life skill. But that's also a form of negotiating because what you're doing is modeling for the other person. I'm standing up for myself without putting the other person down. In our contemporary world, it seems to be popular to do just the opposite, to feel better about yourself by putting other people down. I don't think that gets us anywhere. I know that connections and reconnections aren't happening. They're stalling all over the place. I think it's a really bad trend. That's one of the reasons why RETHINK was created, to get not only individuals and important relationships, but communities and cultures and nations to begin rethinking, thinking with connection in mind. With the N, with the negotiation, we're doing it with open communication and mutual benefit. See how we pulled it back to mutual benefit? Let's end with the K. And I have my mother to thank for this one, because the K came to me instantly. And it's kindness. When we practice kindness, amazing things happen. It's transformative. My daughter has the amazing ability to be exceptionally kind at the right time. My wife has the ability to not only find kindness within her, but be kind. It emanates from her. So the K is kindness. It's being mindful of others and acting with compassion and understanding. Here's where I like to have fun. So obviously that means accessing empathy. So empathy and kindness, they're somewhat one of the same, if you will. An expression of kindness is kind of anticipating how the person's going to feel about that and doing something kind for that individual. Making sure that it's genuine and authentic will elevate them and will give you a sense of connection, however temporary it might be. So to really kind of drill home the importance of kindness and empathy, how they're conjoined, I went back to the Einstein theory of E equals mc squared. So let me change that. Let me take E equals mc squared and filter it through relationship intelligence. E equals empathy. E equals, okay, now I'm interested. How can I be empathic? Well, E equals mc squared. M is mindfulness. Being mindful not only of what's going on in your mind, but being mindful of possibly what's going on in the other person's mind and at least having a best guess. That's mindfulness. E equals mc squared. C is compassion. The ability to respond in a way where another person feels felt. That's compassion. Remember I said E equals mc squared? The C squared showing compassion in such a way that you've never done it before. We can always get better at compassion. I just say when compassion is needed before you deliver it, double on it. Double up. Double up. So let's now take RETHINK and break it down into a workplace example. Picture a team that's under a lot of pressure. Deadlines are tight, tensions are rising, a direct report misses key details, and the leader's instinct is to correct them immediately and sharply. That leader is an autopilot version of leadership. Now imagine that same leader takes 5 seconds and rethinks it. What's going on with this team member? How can I respond in a way that protects the trust that we have developed and improves that other person's performance? The result is a more constructive conversation, a more engaged employee, and a leader who's respected, not just obeyed. That's the power of rethinking. Think of a team with low collaboration. Instead of assuming people just don't care, a rethink leader gets curious. Are there unspoken frustrations? Are there unclear roles? Are there missed opportunities for appreciation? Rethink behavior is teachable. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present. Being present, being curious. Being intentional and being curious. Being intentional and curious and being flexible. Those are the 3 ultimate mindsets that come together, play well with one another, and gives you an ultimate opportunity to turn conflict into connection. Being intentional, being curious, being flexible falls under the rethink umbrella. So you could you take an advanced course on mindsets and drill down each one of these mindsets about intentionality and curiosity and flexibility and come up with some really important information. Or you could also say that all falls under the heading of rethink. Hey, let me rethink this. So this week, call to action is, I want you to pick one interaction, whether it's in a meeting, maybe it's during a feedback conversation, or maybe it's in a text exchange. You pause and you ask yourself, am I thinking with connection in mind? Am I reacting or rethinking? What would change if I responded with empathy, curiosity, and clarity? Let me give you an example of the power of this acronym of RETHINK. I could take any one of these letters. Let's say the R, the relationship one. What's the relationship I need to strengthen? You could rethink that. I need to strengthen this relationship, whatever that might be. The H, what conversation needs more honesty, deserves more clarity? It's the power of honesty. I, what decision would benefit from imagination? Instead of just moving forward in the direction that you always move, be imaginative and ask yourself, what's another way? I want you to write it down. I want you to practice it. That's how a rethink mindset becomes a muscle. So thanks for joining me on this foundational episode of the RETHINK podcast. Remember, rethink isn't just a clever word, it's a new lens. When you think with connection in mind, everything shifts. You become a better teammate, a more intentional leader, and a more grounded version of yourself. Follow RETHINK podcast on Apple and Spotify. Visit davidzierk.com for free resources and leadership tools that help you strengthen your relationship intelligence, one interaction at a time. Until next time, keep rethinking with connection in mind, because that's how we grow stronger together.